about limits, man. Whoa. Okay, calm down.
And one other thing, Louis, I want to ask you about. You have a video that an interview. Can you just set this up and then we'll show it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an interview with a resident, a portion of an interview with a resident in East Palestine. Her name is Lonnie Miller. Lonnie is a small business owner in the town of East Palestine, literally right on Main Street. You could throw a rock at the tracks from the front of her business, but you could also throw a rock at the tracks from her front yard because the tracks are essentially in her front yard. In the full interview, she essentially recounts the entire night of the derailment and first 3 days. It's during the interview. I mean, I was almost crying a couple of times. Lonnie was unfortunately in tears through a lot of it. And it's because it's such a tragic event. I mean, imagine being home, hearing this happen, seeing that the end of your street just looks like it's on fire and that your neighbors' homes look like they're on fire. And so this is a portion of that interview where Lonnie also talks about the unfortunate realities of the railroad industry as a whole and how unfortunately common derailments in general really are.
Sunday, when we left before the catastrophic failure and they said you have to leave, my husband and I landed at the Ramada in Beaver Falls, PA. And that night when I went to take our dog out to the parking lot, she needed to use the restroom, I encountered 3 of the rail workers. Being naive, I actually stood there in the hallway of the hotel and I thanked the elderly worker, the older gentleman. I thanked him for coming to help our town and tell how naive I was. And he looked at me and he said, with a southern accent, "Ma'am, this is my job." He says, "This is what we do. We're going to clean up this mess and we're going to move on to the next one. There'll be another one tomorrow." And he said it so nonchalantly and uncaring and like it didn't matter and that it's going to happen again. It absolutely terrified me. I went back to my hotel room and I sat on the floor and I cried. I just cried, knowing that what we were experiencing, the last 2.5 days of my life, that it's going to happen to someone else. And it has to stop. Something has to give. It has to stop. And I'm coming forward today because I want it to stop. We can't keep living like this in our country, in the world. These are people's lives at stake, and we matter. Our families matter. And it just breaks me. It just breaks me knowing that everything that we've lived through for the last month and a half, and that could happen. It could happen tonight. It could happen anywhere. And just feeling that no one is coming to help us.
Lonnie's story is tragic, and I encourage folks. That video is on Status Quo. It's a fairly long interview. We talked through literally her entire, the 3 to 4 days from the derailment up until finally being able to kind of get into some sort of routine, whether it be it's a terrible routine, unfortunately, that a lot of these folks are having to live through right now. But it's worth listening to. It's probably a half an hour long or so. But that interview is really powerful. And a Pennsylvania representative said it best, and I forget which one specifically said it at a hearing that I was at on my second trip to East Palestine, because a lot of folks forget that this derailment happened just a couple hundred feet from the Pennsylvania border. So residents of Pennsylvania are very much affected by this as well, and they are not getting nearly, Ohio's not getting enough help, but Pennsylvania's been fully ignored in a lot of this. But a Pennsylvania representative said it best, and kind of talks a little bit about what Lonnie is saying there, is that derailment is just part of the business model for these railroads at this point. When you have upwards of 1,700 derailments a year, how can we continue to let this happen, as Lonnie just said right there?